What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I also host the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that is sponsored by Dove Men Care. It's also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And in collaboration with both those organizations, I've been able to reach out directly or indirectly to over 75,000 fathers around the world this year. And I'm humbled by that opportunity. Also, I am the board chair for the Global Food and Drink Initiative, a multimedia not-for-profit that showcases Blacks in the diaspora that are doing their thing in food, drink, and travel. And as always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem, and Blackalicious. And tonight, September 20th, it is another Canadian election, and we have some of the smartest people that I know. We're going to be keeping up with what's going on in the election. Now, we do know that the large majority of the polls either just have closed in Ontario and in Quebec region, and in the east they have closed. So we're keeping a track of what's going on. We'll be on at least for an hour, maybe hour and a half, to see where the flow goes, or we may stay on until we hear some sort of prediction of majority, minority, etc. So let me get the smart people, the smarter people who are smarter than me on the line. First up, always like to do women first. First up, we have Dr. L. Jones from the lovely place of Nova Scotia. So she can give us a take on what's going on in Scotia. What's going on, Elle?
How are you doing?
You've had a long day.
I know. I'm extremely tired, as you can probably see. But, now we're waiting to see these results, which we may not know until Wednesday, apparently. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we may not know anything till Wednesday because, again, mailed-in votes, etc., etc. So we'll see what we can get out of tonight. Let's put it that way. We may need to do a part 2 later on in the week because we may not, just maybe the aftermath. So let's go next to Nicole Waldron, a longtime friend who is here with her smiles as always. Nicole, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm chilling. I'm trying not to be too tired. I'm exhausted, but I'm trying.
Everybody's exhausted. Everybody.
The good news is I know I can sleep tonight because I know we're not going to have the full results tonight, so we can go to sleep. It's almost like we're mimicking the U.S. tonight, where we're going to go to sleep with all these mail-in ballots.
Does Canada want to mimic the U.S.?
Well, in that sense of the mail-in ballots, something's happening. Something's happening.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time. I was able to get you on a last minute notice, so I appreciate that. Next up, Cesar Ndema-Moussa, who dropped the bomb yesterday with his comment about the current prime minister being a drama queen or drama king because he was a drama teacher as a teacher. So Cesar, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good, and hello, sisters. Hello, brothers. No, basically, to me, this is a fascinating night. And I will talk about it maybe later, but we will get to see whether Justin Trudeau's gamble of elections during a pandemic will make him out to become a political genius, aka even if he's just reelected. But even if he's just reelected with a minority, the PPC is digging a hole in the Conservative Party that might be a bonus for the Liberal for the next 2 or 3 elections. Or will he be remembered in history books as, like I said yesterday, a failed drama teacher who tried a bit too hard his last act? Because if he fails, bye-bye. So, but at the end of the day, we're all here for one thing. Will Black Lives even matter? Have Black lives even matter during these elections? We all know how they failed at addressing systemic racism.
All right. And back again, Louis March from the Zero Gun Violence Movement from Toronto. Louis, how you doing?
Feeling good, excited. Anxious to see how the Canadian public responds to the gamblers' play. And there's a circus of clowns, but at the same time, sometimes you wonder who are the real clowns, right? I'm curious because there's some money on the table for the Black community for capacity building, and I'm anxious to see how this unfolds because I want to make sure that money still flows.
Okay, well, good. Let's ask each of you. How did you spend your day today?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I can't even begin. Wait.
Everyone see who wants to start?
But
Like,
you know what? I had a good busy day. You can tell most people are back from vacation, and so lots of meetings. I think you're my last meeting. My last meeting before you ended at like 6:30. So, and when you called and said, I mean, who can say no to Dr. Vibe when he calls and say, come in the house. We need to have a conversation. And for me, I've had meetings today on housing, co-op housing, and mental health. So, well, here I am. Now we're going to see how people are voting.
okay. Did anyone's go ahead, Cesar? You're going to speak. My apologies.
No, I was just going to say, well, I went to the gym, I worked, I looked after my family, I ate, and here I am. I wasn't going to miss this. I mean, look, even though we're only 4% or less than 4% of the general population of Canada, our vote matters. But the question very often is, to what extent are people willing to stand up to bring change? Whether you're 4%, 40%, or 0.4%, you can make change. And it doesn't take an election, to change that. It just takes our communities and our individual people to come together and to be strong. That's all it is.
Yeah, my day was about the Mothers Peace Walk that we have planned for this week in Toronto. Between me and you, I'm calling it the 100,000.
Mm.
We need to get 100 mothers out that have been impacted by gun violence. We had another weekend here where we have 3 fatalities, a youth worker. Like, it's just blatant brazenness right now. Who can outbat each other and who's paying the price? But at the same time, while this is going on, there's mothers, there's fathers, there's communities, there's families that are crying 24/7 from their loss and pain, but the mothers are seldom, their voice is seldom heard. So for us, this peace walk that we're going to do on Saturday, we're just going to make sure that all the right pieces are in place, and that's what I've been working on today, and we'll be working until the end of the week to make sure it works out the way it's designed.
So, and just a little bit of a promo. Louis is going to be on my Morning Vibe show on this Friday morning, talking about the Peace Walk. So if you're watching the Dr. Vibe show on YouTube or Facebook on Friday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, he'll be talking about that. So subscribe to the YouTube channel or the Facebook channel. Hearing from all of you, other than Elle, it doesn't seem like the election was even, did it even cross your mind today?
I tried not to let it cross my mind today. I voted in the advanced election because I know today would be really hard. But it has no choice but to cross your mind because it's such an important election that can just shift the trajectory of the country. So, it has to cross your mind, but at the same time, we just have to wait it out because we have no control over what's going to happen today. It's too close to call, and it's a matter of patience and what can I say? Elle, I see you shaking your head like, yeah.
No, I'm just like, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say other than me. I think other than voting today, and then I just came from another show. There's so many, like politics is also the lived experience. So, I mean, when I'm like, I can't even talk, I mean, just so many different crises have been hitting me in the last month, particularly the last week. And, that's why I'm just exhausted right now because you're still dealing with those things. They don't stop. Like people's daily lived lives don't go, as Louis is saying, people are still, getting shot and having to deal with that. And sometimes that's also the break between how we live out and experience politics on the ground and then the performance of politics by those in it. I remember when I was invited on CBC last election and then, never made the air, but they were like, oh, we envision it like a cocktail party, like all the cool people that you would want to, have a drink with. That's what they see, like the white elites ultimately see this as a nice cocktail party. I'm like, this is life and death for people. This is people in prison are they all organize to vote liberal. They're like, not necessarily because we love the liberals, but because we can't have the conservatives. Like, because they're like, our visiting will go, like our phone calls can go, our parole will go. So, we have to vote. Like, those are people organizing to vote for their lives, right? So, but those issues don't stop before an election. They don't stop after election. They can intensify. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I was particularly focused on the election today. I was more focused on trying to get people housed. This massive, trying to get people out of this park and into housing. Like, trying to deal with people jumping off the roof in prison.
Wow.
Like trying to get people connected to their education in prison, and like that's just what we do all day, every day, right? So.
Yeah, there's a reality on the streets. There's a reality in our families, in our communities, with no pause button for an election. We still have to do the 24/7. We still have to deal with the day-to-day realities, the challenges, and the disappointments, and we still have to survive. So the election's on my mind, yes, because the outcome will give us some indication of how to tackle some of these issues from a political perspective, but there's no pause button for oppression. There's no pause button for anti-Black racism because of an election, even though it does influence how things potentially could unfold. So that's been my biggest concern about the election itself, and trying to get our communities and our people to realize that they have more power than they think that they do.
We're all saying the same thing, Dr. Vi, because interestingly, hearing my sisters and my brother talk, at lunchtime when I sent about every 2 weeks, I send a list of links and resources in the child welfare sector across the province. And that was pretty much the message that I sent them in my second line of the email, which is I didn't send these links and resources on Friday to maybe influence anyone's vote, but I'm sending them today so that it hits them further, whether they have voted or they won't vote, because they have to understand that the issues that are addressed in the emails, systemic racism, LGBTQ rights, the place of indigenous people, but also addressing the hypocrisy of Quebec regarding, the English debate and attacks on Quebec, but the same Quebec that denies addressing systemic racism towards Blacks and indigenous, etc., etc. All of these issues are beyond these federal elections. Absolutely important. And I really think society shifting, especially when we look at the rise of basically what we could call MCGA, Make Canada Great Again, aka the PPC, a borderline white supremacist, openly white supremacist party in Canada. So definitely society is shifting, but for the vast majority of people, and I always say it, you should never be disinterested by politics, because politics will never lose interest in you. But the vast majority of people, especially our Black people, so impacted in terms of COVID, socioeconomics, safety from violence on the street, but also violence such as police brutality and violence from institutions. I can go on and on. These elections, people are trying to survive to make it to midnight and to be alive at noon and to be again alive at midnight and the day after and so forth. So, yeah, absolutely. We are saying the same thing. It's beyond this election for as much as this election will matter. But for our people, it's just another day of survival.
I want to ask, do you feel that Black Canadians, from your conversations you're having with people in your environment, did Black Canadians go out and vote, or did you encounter a number of Black Canadians that says, I have no reason to vote? And if those who said to you, I have no reason to vote, do you blame them?
You asking me that, me first?
Anybody on the panel.
I can have the ladies go first. I just thought.
I can't say that I actually have many conversations about the election with Black people. I think you have them after the fact. I mean, certainly here there was a quite bit of reaction to the provincial election. There was a couple of Black family meetings about that, but I haven't really been walking around, just to be honest, like talking to people about the election, because in some ways, I suppose, when you're engaged in activism in deep ways, like you almost live in that bubble. Half the time I don't know what the news, people are like, did you see that news? I'm like, what news? You know, the only news I know is the news of, you know, what's happening over here in the prison, or the news of what's happening in the park or whatever. So, but that's it, right? That people living in the most precarious situations, whom these things affect the most, are also the least likely to vote, the least likely to talk about voting. May not even know that they can vote, even though you can vote if you're unhoused and things like that. So I don't think I've actually really had a single conversation here about the election. I've had just so many conversations about other things. And that perhaps also speaks to what Cesar is saying, right? That, you know, this election at a time where there's increased crisis, there's more and more people in shelters, there's more and more people experiencing domestic abuse, more people losing their homes, more people losing their jobs. So people aren't necessarily equipped or thinking about, you know, how to go out and vote, and of course the Elections Canada site crashed today, so you couldn't even find your polling station, you know, like, so then people don't have time for that, right? So I think even though, of course, these things ultimately govern our lives and are important, they're not necessarily important in the immediate and day-to-day. So you're not necessarily walking around like talking about the vote. You're trying to talk about, like, how do we deal with this crisis? What's going on? You know, how do we fight these things in our community? So I actually know I don't think other than talking with my students, right? Because I teach politics, so I've talked to my students about it, but I haven't really talked about it in community.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. I think anyone else want to chime in? You know, did you get a sense at all that Black Canadians were either going to go to the polls or not show up the polls? Louis, I know in one of our previous conversations, you were trying to, you know, I know how much you care and want our Black youth to be involved. As the day of voting came up, did you sense any pro or con of them going out even to vote? Because it didn't sound like a lot of them wanted to be engaged.
Well, I think the political climate is such that a lot of people think that it's not going to make a difference. But in terms of speaking to the young people, my efforts was geared on, you know, you walked with us, you protested, you demonstrated last summer. How do we get you out to the voting stations to vote? And it was a difficult hill to climb. But even today, I've heard of some young people actually going out and voting, and young ones. The adults are the ones that I'm having difficulty with. You know, still with the belief that it's politics, it's not going to make a difference, and that they're not really concerned about us anyway. So it's a constant battle, letting them know that when you wake up in the morning until you go to bed, everything that you do is political. And these people that are making decisions on your behalf that affect your life and your children's lives and your family's life and your community life, we can't give them a blank check. We have to make our mark. And some people have responded and some people have not. And I just like to comment on the fact that some of our people just don't have the time to go and stand up in the line for 2 hours to go and vote. That's their reality. That's their reality. They don't have time in their schedule to go standing up in line and waiting to go and vote. So they find other things that are more important to do. So there's many battles in this war. And some people have responded, you know, I'm going to take it on. And some people have said, I'd rather go into another battlefield and deal with other stuff. But I know that there's been more discussions in our community about the elections, especially with the monies that have been put on the table to for community development and capacity building. And how do we ensure those monies are still around after the elections? So a lot of people are concerned about that. And that might have been the driver to get them out to vote but there's a reality for a lot of our people in our community that have more important, they say more important things to do. Our focus is on the young people, not only to vote, but to get involved in the process. One person said just a while ago to me that she did go out and vote, but she didn't complete her research. So they're realizing that there's a relationship here. You have to understand what's going on and make your mark where you want. So things are changing. There's an awareness, but there's a reality that we have to deal with. And as I said at my opening comments, we have more power than we think. And it's about time to start activating it. We as a community.
Okay, I'm going to parking lot. Go ahead, Nicole.
I just want to add to the question that you were asking. And I think it depends on what circle that you are in the community. And I happen to sit in different parts of it. And for my circle, the conversation is on voting and getting out there and vote. And a lot of people in my circle went out early and did the advance voting. But I also recognize that a lot of them took advantage of the mail-in ballots. The fact with COVID, the fact of thinking of lining up, and also the challenge of the reduced polling stations in many areas, which in a sense has created more of a voter suppression in some ways. That's one of the things that has happened with COVID. Like I look at my riding, we have a 58% decrease in polls that people can go to voting, and with the site crashing today, that has exacerbated the problem. And yet, the conversation around those of us like, the co-op housing movement, we have been really pushing and equipping our people with the tools to vote and giving them information, not telling them who to vote for, but speaking to the issue and educating people on, if you have an issue, listen to what the politicians are saying or not saying. So yes, some people aren't thinking about it, but I think more so than ever, because of some of the investments made in some places and lack of investments in other places, there has been a lot of conversations in it, and it depends on the advocacy rooms that you're sitting in. Because sometimes when you're on the street, of course, they have no thought about voting, but even visiting one of the hospitals on the mental health ward, they were making sure that even they knew how to vote. So it really depends on who's having the conversation, and the fact of they recognize that it is important that we have a voice and that we are not suppressed in our voting. And I know people like the Jamaican Canadian Association, people like Daniel Dowdy, and we have a lot of people in our community that are out, especially on the Ontario side, making sure that or encouraging our people to go out and our community to go out and vote and let their voice be heard, because if you don't vote, you don't really have a voice.
Okay. So just reading some of the comments here in real time. Ryan is saying lineup is crazy in Vaughan, LOL. Hello, Joan. Pierre, as always. Christopher Lawrence has an interesting question. What can we do to curb the thinking of us to have us vote more? What can be done? Is there anything that can be done to get a higher turnout of Black Canadians for the election? Because I would love, and I mentioned this in a previous conversation, I would love to know if Stats Canada could tell us, of the eligible Black Canadian voters out there, what percentage voted in this election. I find that very interesting. But getting back to Christopher's question for the panel, what can be done to curb the thinking so more Black people will vote?
I think it's important, if I can just take a crack at it. Look, the issues that are being discussed are not the issues that are affecting my people. They skirt them. Did anybody talk about anti-Black racism? No. Did anybody talk about systemic racism? Did anybody talk about economic employment opportunities affecting the people that are most impacted by it? No. Right? Did anybody talk about immigration? Who's immigrating to Canada? Can I bring my family across? Or do I have to have $1 million in my bank before I do it? Like, the issues that they're speaking about are not specific to our community.
But here's the
And
thing,
that's one of
Louis.
the reasons why.
But here's the thing, Louis. The problem is if our community does not start, and if you can bring us all on screen for a second, Luke, if our community doesn't start speaking up, your matters won't count. And the fact is, if you sit there docile and saying they're not speaking about it, the reason they're not speaking about it is because we don't make them speak about it. When we put issues at the forefront and the lobby groups know how to do it, we have to come together as a community and let them know until you make your voice heard, whether it's verbally, with your money, put your money where your mouth is, start speaking up, start coming together, just like Black Lives Matter in the US. They heard them, didn't they? So Canadians have this way that we like to be complacent. The Black community has to stop being complacent with our issues and only speak up when they so choose. They need to speak up more consistently. And from the minute this election was called, we should have been out there in our organizations and saying, these are the issues that matter, and make them talk about it. But did we do that? So in essence, if the big organizations that speak or say they speak for the Black community don't come out, do you think the people on the ground are going to think they have any type of influence?
But Nicole, the problem here is, I hear what you're saying, and that leads to the solution to this. We have to get more involved up front. But the thing is, the organizations that we would hope would speak about these issues, they're funded by the government.
Yeah.
So how can they speak up?
So then that's where we have people like yourself
saying that go out and vote. But we're supposed to be more direct. This is the party that is going to do us the best, serve us the best, represent us the best. How many organizations do you know out there that is not funded by the government to some extent, that can speak freely?
Dr. Vibe, doesn't that remind you what we were saying yesterday?
Continue on, but see, and Louis is on fire tonight, folks. So he is coming.
And I agree with you, because we know a lot of issues.
And not only organizations, but I think it's something like in Nova Scotia, I can't remember the numbers. I heard something like 80% of Black people have some kind of civil service or government job. So even if you're not working in a Black organization, I remember Sherry Borden-Colley, a journalist here after the election, the provincial election, and this whole brouhaha with having a white minister of African Nova Scotian affairs was like, oh, people can't speak out about this because, people work for the government. How many people can even say anything? And I'm like, well, wow, if we can't even say something about that, no wonder we have a hard time organizing for political progress. Because also, of course, and Black people I'm not saying Black people are wrong in this. Like, we're always precarious. We're always in danger of losing our jobs. We know that even when we're the sweetest and nicest, we're called as angry. So it is difficult for us to be in a position where we can take positions. But the result of this is, often Black people, I learned this, I suppose, earlier when I was like, why do people think I'm like so off, And I'm like, because people just don't say things. So it didn't seem to me like I was saying anything particularly novel or radical, but the fact that I was willing to say those things and am willing to say those things still marks me out in a particular way. And it's not that these aren't things that people don't think or other people don't know, or, it's just that they do not say them. So as Louis is saying, right, that even speaking out as a Black person, and of course I am worried about our democratic energies being almost entirely invested into voting, which is what a white settler colonial society wants you to do, is see your obligation to democracy as beginning and ending with casting a vote. And then of course you don't get to vote if we go to war. You don't get to vote what actually happens with anything. We have no model of direct democracy. If you look at Cuba, like 92% of people participate in their elections because they have, so as much as we're like, oh, Cuba, communism, but like people participate and they have models of from the local all the way up, right? From every single piece, people vote on all of those little things. So we don't vote, we don't even have a school board anymore, but like when we had one, we don't vote for it. We don't vote municipally. Like those numbers are so tiny. And then we're just told that our only obligation is in the federal election. So while like it should be the last thing we do, not the only thing we do. Like it should mark the culmination of all kinds of political activity. But we're always taught in this society that it's the only obligation we have. And then everyone freaks out if people don't vote, but nobody gets mad if people haven't attended a protest. Nobody gets mad if you haven't gone to your local school board meeting. Nobody gets mad. Like these are all things that are actually like, you should be going to your police board. You should be going and viewing your city council. People don't even understand basic governance structures because it's not taught to us in school. People don't know what level of government is responsible for what. They have no idea actually what happens and what you do. Like just very basic civic things.
Let me interrupt you then.
Yeah.
Whose responsibility is that for the education process?
I mean, school, I mean, we know this, that our schools don't really teach you. They teach you citizenship as in like show up on time, dress code, and like become a good, worker for the, we're here to become good workers, cannon fodder, and citizens in particular ways in school. But of course, the school isn't there to actually teach you how to self-empower. Like even if you have a good teacher, the whole institution of school is not there for that. So, I always say this, I've said this over and over again, like we need to be having this long-term organizing, but we need to be doing it in ways that are like organizing tenants or the prisons are organized. I mean, that's a really interesting example because I actually taped a guy from prison to play in my class. And, he was explaining how the prison organs vote, right? That they have the ethnic committees, they have Black and Maiden Friends, they have the Lifers Committee, they have different bodies they already have set up. And those committee leads go around from range to range and work on people and say, like, we're voting Liberal. This is how we vote. Like, this is what you're voting for, and prepare the way so that when Elections Canada comes in and it's well known and organized across every level of prison in Canada, prisoners vote Liberal. Now, I'm not like supporting that. I'm just saying they do. That is what they do. Everyone you talk to, did you vote? They voted Liberal. Like they have an organ to do that, an understanding of what it means for them. But that's because they have pre-organized committees and they have these organs. So we could take a lesson as Black people. Like we don't have Black voting committees that go door to door in our communities that pre-organize things. We don't have those equivalents. Where we have these, we do have Black Vote Canada, and you like go on their page. I was looking for my class because I wanted to do graphs on like racial voting in Canada. I can't find it. So that shows you that it's like not even on the radar. I could find youth voting patterns and generational voting patterns, but I'm sure it's somewhere buried. But I looked for like an hour and I could not find a graph of like racial voting patterns just to put on a PowerPoint for my students. So, it's still like somewhat off the radar. So I think, again, voting reflects the culmination of a series of organizing principles. And we're not going to learn that in school. We're not going to learn that from somebody else. So we have to learn it ourselves. I would say it's like, why don't we go to police board? We don't go to the police board. They oversee the police. We'll go and protest the police. And then you go to the police board and you're the only person there. We don't present at the police board. We don't this is one of the most important accountability mechanisms for our police, the civilian oversight. And we don't go So, and I don't actually blame us, like whoever tells you that part of your democratic responsibility is to go and watch your police board. So what can voting mean if we're not actually engaged in all the ways that democratic engagement is supposed to mean for us? So I think that's what the problem is. We have a very detached idea that you're a great, and then people that do nothing politically go online and critique people that didn't vote, and you're like, but all you did was vote. Like, what else have you done? So I think it has to be connected back to our broader organizing for people. And this is what Louis was saying as well, right? That you have to show up at the protest and then you have to show up here and then you have to put your vote into action. But it has to be part of, we have to understand it as a series of engagements, a series of commitments, a series of organizing, and not just on this one night, go check your ballot. Of course, people don't find that relevant and they find it disconnected because we have disconnected it and the state deliberately disconnects it in order to prevent us from actually doing the kind of democratic engagement where real change takes place.
Elle, if this is you when you don't have a lot of energy, my goodness. I'm going to go to Cesar. Just give me a second. I'm going to catch up on comments. I'm going to fall way behind. So Sarah has a number of comments here. She's saying people have to actually know what they're voting for in each election. They must be educated on what what directly impacts them, for which different levels of government are responsible. Federal immigration, federal law enforcement, border control, federal penitentiaries, OAS, CBP, EI, and other programs affecting our income, CBC, Canada, arts, etc. Federal, international development and trade programs that affect our countries of origin in Africa and the Caribbean. So I'll just leave it there because another question from the audience has come up. So let's go to Cesar.
Thank you, Dr. Vibe. I wanted to take a moment before replying, and I'm really glad not only at the responses from my co-panelists, sisters and brother, but as well the comments in the chat, notably from Sarah Nyengo. One of the things that I've always said, I've been saying it for years, I teach it, I present it in conferences, in trainings. I talk about it all the time. I say it. The three cancers of the Black psyche: entertainment, consumerism, and religion. It preoccupies the minds of our people in a way that make them detached to civic duties, in a sense where the powerlessness and victimization become such a focus that they think they have no power to change their fate, notably on a political level. When it comes to politics, there's a simple rule that says you are free not to care about politics, but don't get it twisted. Politics will care about you. Care, aka, will take advantage of you, will decide of your fate if you don't get involved. Now, it may sound contradictory because I don't deny it. I am apolitical, but apolitical in meaning that the development of Black communities, from the individuals, notably our children in the school, to our adults, is what will bring the change. There's a comment that was inquiring from Christopher Lawrence. Do you think first we should focus on getting sound economically and then politically? It goes together, left hand and right hand. That's how you get the respect. Yesterday on the show, I gave the example of the Sikh community, from the Sikh driver that you see in his truck on the highway to the representation of Sikh politicians in the Ontario Parliament, just as in the federal government with the Minister of Defense. That's how a community get involved. At the same time, I remember, I think it was last year, March 2020, a school that called on to me because they had a particular problem. What was that problem? A high school where the vast majority of Black parents did not show up for academic duties, but they were always there when it was a matter of culture / entertainment. It's problematic. It's problematic because our children see this, our teenagers see this. Our teenager and our young adults become detached. And when they become adults, they become so fearful, kind of as El was saying, in terms of, okay, you're supposed to vote because it's the federal elections, but you don't have a sense of civic understanding of everything that is involved in terms of voting. Did you attend your children, parents, teachers meetings? Did you get involved before even the protest? Did you even get involved on the school board council? Did you go listen? Did you go pay attention? Do you even have these conversations with your family? Are your children growing up in an environment where they are becoming aware of their rights and duties, or they are growing up in an environment where they know the TV shows and they can name so many Black celebrities in sports and in entertainment? It's highly problematic. And when I say it's highly problematic, I'm going to put it, and I'm going to end here. I remember a conference that I gave in a high school. And I asked a question. There was majority, it was pretty equal, 1/3 Black, 1/3 Arab, 1/3 white. I asked the question. None of the Black kids knew the MPs, and they did not even know who was the richest Black person in the world. It's two Lebanese boys. They knew who Aliko Dangote, the richest Black person in the world, is, and they knew who were the Black MPs in Ottawa. That is embarrassing. It's even more embarrassing because they laughed at the Black kids. The problem is not the Black kids per se. The problem is the environment from which these Black kids come from, because just before that question, when I asked to name 5 rich and famous Black people, they could give 100 in a minute, but they couldn't answer 2 simple questions. Do you know your Black MPs? And do you know the richest Black person in the world? It starts at home. Civic engagement starts at home.
Nicole, go ahead, please.
You're on mute, Nicole.
I'm talking to my doggone self here, and I should know better.
Yeah, you're a big shot host, so
whatever. I agree 100% and then some. I let me go back a second. Growing up in the Caribbean, from Trinidad and Tobago, I grow up and I'm seeing Black leaders. You know what I'm saying, Al? my prime minister is a person of color. unfortunately for me, my aunt was one of the first female ministers. So I'm growing up seeing Black leaders. I see Black doctors, judges. So it is normal for me, and it's normal for me to see advocacy. And what happens here, there's this complacency, and and Louis said it as well, fear, and you said it as well. Fear comes in, but I listen. I live in a co-op. I've lived in my co-op 26 years, and I volunteered there, and I became the first Black president of Co-op Housing Federation in Canada. Luke put us all on. I like to see the faces. Don't just show me, Luke. I like the engagement of my fellow participants.
That's when I lean back to rest.
I know, but I want to see you, Elle. I want to see everybody. And, people say, well, why do you volunteer and why do you spend your time? And, people say, that's all you do. But it's that volunteerism, that civic engagement that has gotten me, knowing the issues and being a participant and making a difference. Because if I don't do that, if I didn't sit on the student council, Neil McNeil's high school would have been amalgamated and thrown out the door. And I didn't have a voice for my son. If I didn't sit in my co-op, there wouldn't be other Black leaders. And I'm not, tooting my horn here, but, it was the old boys club. Right? So they don't think that they have the opportunity. If our community doesn't continue to be active in civic engagement, not just the silos, we need to bring others alongside us, and those who criticize us and say, well, why are you volunteering and why are you giving your time and it needs to be about the money? No, our people are dying for lack of your speaking. Voices need to be heard. You need to show our young people that their voice matters. This is why, when I say victory speaks, victory does speak. And when you are silent, there is no victory. So until our community becomes more active, Louis is doing his piece. Everybody, but we are just so many people, and eventually we get burnt out and we get tired. You hear the same voices all the time. You have people, the shoulders we've stood on, like, Dr. Jean Augustine, and, we have, how many Black senators do we have now? I worked in the Senate and I was the only Black EA in 50 whatever years. Come on, people. How many Black senators do we have now? Because people don't want to be involved, or they're afraid of being criticized, or you're afraid of losing your job. What society do you want your children and your great-grandchildren to grow up in? And unless you get civically engaged, when it's time to vote, people don't care, because you know what? You haven't been active and you've been too afraid. And if we let fear continue to rule us like we're back in the day, we are no longer enslaved people. So stop acting like you're enslaved. You have a freedom to speak, a freedom to move. You see, you riled me up, my brother. You riled me up.
Good. Well, I have not heard from Louis in a bit. So, Louis, need to hear from you.
I'm going to leave in about 15 minutes because it is an hour ahead and I have to teach 1 million times tomorrow. And you can see
well, you know what? If you want, you actually, Elle, if you want, you can leave now with final comments, because
I was just going to say very briefly, because the returns of Atlantic are coming back more and more. Could be a bad sign. Conservatives have gained here. I mean, it's too early to tell. The advanced ballots obviously aren't in. Mail-in, like all of that stuff is not in yet. But the Conservatives have gained seats. Some Liberal incumbents are out. In 2015, of course, Atlantic Canada went pure red. There was nothing else. And they lost 3 seats in 2019. It looks like they've lost a couple of more seats. So that can be an early harbinger of Conservative doom. But of course, we don't know anything till we get to Toronto. Notably out is Lenore Zan, a Liberal candidate for Trudeau, who introduced the environmental racism bill. When she was an MLA here, she kind of got shut down in legislature because she tried to recite my Black Power poem, and she was drumming her fist in the air, being like, Black Power! And they're like, you need to sit down now. So she is now out of office, which is probably disappointing. She's not Black, of course, but she has been an ally to the Black community, works very closely with Dr. Lynn Jones, of course, our earth-shaking elder. So that's one return already that's, I suppose, quite disappointing, and also may show something. Of course, the Greens are totally wiped off the map. They had gained that seat in Fredericton with Jenica Atwin, who ended up crossing the floor to the Liberal Party, ironically over Palestine. So, leaving because of Annamie Paul's attitude towards Palestine, but going to the Liberals who share the exact same attitude on Palestine. So that was, made not too much principled sense. And the Greens have lost total foothold, as is the NDP, who only had 1 seat. So that's what the returns are looking like here. But of course, as usual, you don't know anything till you hit Ontario. And because the lines along in Ontario, who knows when you actually be getting a full picture in the GTA. So that's just my Atlantic update. And as you've been seeing me looking down, you're trying to like stay on the on your phone. So that's why I'm always like looking down when you're seeing. I'm trying to stay caught up. But that's my Atlantic Canada update. I don't really have anything else. I am gonna go from you beautiful people because I have been doing politics all day and I need to be coherent tomorrow. So
no problem.
But bye, y'all. It's always nice to be with Black People Dr. Vibe. It is nice to have a space where Black people are talking all kinds of politics. I was just on another thing very briefly saying that, they never call upon us to talk about foreign policy or attitude towards war. We're only in the media when it's blackface or something that's a Black issue, which is going to jail. Like those are the issues. Oh, Black people go to jail and then, we shoot each other and we like are poor. And then they never think to ask us, what do you think of our foreign policy? Or should we be on the Security Council or whatever it is? We are never seen as having a voice. So it's so important, like this space as well as a political building space, that we are speaking as Black people about Black issues, but we are also speaking more broadly. And one of the limitations on Black politics in Canada, I think, is in particular, and this is what you're saying about Trinidad, where you see Black people argue politics on the street all day, every day. Like, you don't have to be educated or elite or professional. Like, people have an opinion. Like, they're just totally talking about it. Whereas we are confined to an idea that we are only to talk about politics in certain ways. We are only ever on the news in those ways. We are never there. Like, when I do CBC, I'm only ever called in its race. They'll never just be like, hey, like, what do you think about like the prison system in China? Like, I know about that. Like, ask me that. Like, you'll never ask me that. So because we have a limited voice, then we also have a limited engagement. So it's really important to have this space. I wish I could stay longer, but you
were fine. Dr. L. Jones, get some rest for the morning. I have a feeling I'm going to be asking you to come back on later on in the week.
No problem. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
All right. That's great. So got a little bit of update in the East. So just to some of their comments here that I'm going to go back up to. Sarah saying civics education should happen at home, in church, in community associations, everywhere. Sarah, Ryan is saying, watching the PPC party event and barely anyone is wearing a mask. Sarah says, yes, Nicole, volunteering in the wider community is an excellent way to soak oneself in the issues on the ground. Nicole says there's about 1.2 million votes in the mail-in. Looks like the PPC has nibbled at some of that conservative support. So Sarah's giving us real-time updates. And Sarah, if you want to come on, I did send you a link to come on, so it is your choice if you want to. So getting back, there's a question here actually from Sarah saying, actually, no, let me stop. Louis, haven't heard from you in a bit. Talk to us.
Yeah. Another missing piece here is we have to be running for office. Our people have to see us running for office. Yep, we're reluctant to do it. I'm reluctant to do it, right? But whenever I speak anywhere, people say, why don't you run for office? Right? Why don't you do that? Because clearly you understand the issues and you speak well and so on, whatever they could say, right? But we have to see running for office as a priority to represent our best interests. Other communities are doing it, and we're not. However, what I did see this year...
We need the funds. Here's the thing. To run for office, we need to galvanize around each other and bring the financial backing, because running for office isn't cheap. Because we look at Leslyn Lewis, how much money she, it was a lot. And so running for office, I agree, we need to run for office, but we need to come together and bring some money and go to the fundraisers and bring the dollars in, because you can't do it if you don't have the dollars.
And it takes time to build that capacity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But what I am seeing there's a lot more people looking like me and you running for office. And it's part of the process. And then in terms of the economics and so on, I think that's critically important. But we have to see ourselves. But then when we get into office, we have to really act. We can't be afraid to be Black. Okay? So this is where the disconnects are. Like, somebody knocked on my door and says, can I count on your vote? represented. I said, you haven't even told me anything that you're doing for me. So why are you asking me? Like, the political process is, the integrity of it is being eroded because it's left in these hands of these people, these political morons that think they can take the public for granted. We got a problem.
But they are, and they have been.
Well, and they have. So we have to stop that.
So how do we stop that then, Louis?
Well,
Because
Danny Stone, who works with Zero Gun Violence Movement, and he's written several books, and he's a life coach, and he's on this program every now and he talks about, you have the keys now, start driving.
Mm-hmm.
We've been passengers too much in this process. We have to become drivers. And as one of my other associates said to me, Louis, not only drivers, we have to start owning the car. So we have to raise the bar. We have to raise the bar. Because if we're leaving this in the hands of others to do for us, that type of dependency model just reinforces all the things that are not in our best interest. So
Dr.
running for office,
don't comment. I think
getting economics.
Yeah. So
these are some of the things that we need to change.
So one of the great members of the Black Canadian community, Joan Pierre, saying they have called the Liberal win, waiting to see if they will make a majority, but it will be a Liberal government.
Oh, really?
That's early. That's really early, but we will see. Now, I just want to catch up with some more things here. Let me just cut. I think Christopher saying, I think seeing is believing. Running for office would give an open driveway for of folks to know, yes, we can. Sarah saying, running for office is a huge investment. The increase in the number of Black candidates this time around, 60 as opposed to 45 last time, has a lot to do with the parties actually helping these candidates with fundraising and recruitment of volunteers. I'll be honest, I have been asked a few times in the past to run. I want no part of it. Because politics is a vicious game. And I see too much that you're not allowed to speak your mind.
Of course. Especially if you dare to say, if you dare to really be Black, to be unapologetically Black. To what extent can you really run for parties in the Western world that, and I mean, including Democrats and Republicans in the South or parties in the UK and in France? At the end of the day, as part of integration, you become that Black candidate or that Black elected person serving the larger goal of the party. You are not truthfully standing up for your community solely. You can't. It doesn't work like that. We are Black people in the age of integration. This is not segregation where Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and, our heroes, Lumumba in Congo, could speak truthfully and unapologetically, despite even the risk that came with it. But at the same time, when we're saying that, because I agree with what Brother Louis is saying in terms of having Black people running for office, but at the same time, do we have a Black community that truthfully and honestly is mobilized, is involved? And I'm not saying this as taking another jab at the community or just criticizing the community, but at the end of the day, it is not for the government or, the help that can come from white allies to mobilize the Black community. These conversations, the Jewish community, the Chinese community, the Sikh community, they don't have them. They mobilize. There's a sense of powerlessness that is made worse in the Black community because of systemic racism. Absolutely. But we also have issues within a community, as Dr. Vibe, you were saying yesterday, you talked about trauma, the distrust towards the government. Just look at the whole conversation regarding COVID. Sarah Onyengo and I have been there online on Facebook addressing a lot of disinformation, a lot of lies, a lot of manipulated facts shared by Black people to other Black people to hide their own ignorance. Meanwhile, we have Black people dying due to complications by COVID, just as we have Black people not being involved, not being educated in the very system, society that they live in, for them to make a change because of the fear of too many people where they want to live in the Western world, in a Western nation such as Canada, but they're scared to actually stand up and dare to be black.
I just want to jump in here. So CTV News and CBC News are saying liberals are going to end up with it. They're projecting liberals are going to get the most number of seats. Now the question is, the size of victory is going to be to be determined. They don't know if it's going to be a majority minority. So that's pretty interesting already. They're calling it that way because it does look like we'll see what happens. But I do want to ask, I'm just going to check out something here on this. So I want to ask then, with this election, I was going to save this to the end. I'll save it to the end. So let me come back a little bit. I want to ask then, I'm sort of stuck in thought here. I'm stuck in thought. Yeah, let me go this route. Does this give us any hope going forward, or do we have to ride on ourselves? Actually, what I was going to say is something from yesterday. I'll focus on the black environment because I don't know if there's a black community. That's just me. 3 things blacks have to challenge with, many of us. One of these 3 things, or many of these: trauma, repetition, symbolism. What can be put in place by Black Canadians to end the symbolism? We hear announcements about things, and a lot of times things don't come through. We get all excited about the symbolism, and a lot of times we're doing the same thing over and over again. So it looks at this election, it may not change much politically seats wise. What do we have to do different?
I think we said it all in the conversation about civic engagement. It's about being engaged. It's about getting into not just, look, Louis having a march for gun violence, right? And the mothers. So the call to action, and we have to come around. Go ahead, Dr. Vibe.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. So for those who aren't wanting to get engaged, what do we do with them?
There's different ways you can get engaged, because you don't always have to go on the front lines and march, right? You can have the conversations at home. It starts at home, and we've been saying it. It starts with educating your children and saying, and the young people these days are speaking up more. And some of them, unfortunately, because they don't know their history, or their parents are not, saying A, B, C, D, E, F, G, they don't know that so much work was done. And a lot of them think that, the older generation hasn't done much because they do not know their history. Because some people have had to stay quiet, not because they don't want to be involved. Either they're tired, they're working 2 jobs, they're working 3 jobs, and they just don't have the energy or capacity to get involved. The young people need people like yourself and everybody on this line, and people that you bring on, to start sharing the truth. We need to, this community needs to heal while we're leading, but we need to educate our young generation as to the things that have happened in the past. But now let's equip them to walk us all to victory in the future, and empower them to say your voice matters. And it's not just in football, and it's not just in basketball. These leaders in the places of music and sports that they look up to now have to pull them into civic engagement and show them that it's important that they speak up. Because when we look at the gangs and stuff that we talk about, where even gang, the older generation of gang leaders, right? Louis will say the code is gone. There was a code of ethics among even the gangs that's gone. So something has been lost in the fabric of who we are as human beings. And we have to bring back humanity, the care of humanity, and knowing that each one reach one and bring one up, and we matter. And we have to be, this older generation has to stop fighting against each other.
Allow me to go further. As a conferencier in high schools, but also as a director in the government, people see my earrings and they ask questions. It's so weird. It's so odd. It's surprised. The very image that I project surprise people, but it leads to conversations in terms of the symbolism behind these earrings, the colors of Pan-Africanism on them, but also the physical presence of coming in a high school, students thinking I'm another football player, and no, I'm Mr. Cesar coming to speak to them about racism, coming to educate them about the Black history. And even the white students, they become fascinated. We need to have a Black people. And I'm saying our Black people. This is a conversation among us. Too often, Black people, the conversation becomes, what are white people going to think if they hear us? Oh, what about my imam, my pastor, or whatever that white ideology? No, this is about us. We have too many wannabe Black Panthers in the room, but as soon as a white person is nearby or comes in, they start to shift the speech, and if you bring a camera or a media channel, they disappear. Too many. We need to have people who dare to be unapologetically Black. That doesn't mean being angry or being rude or being anything as such. But if you truly dare to be unapologetically Black, you will be angry. You will be angry not only at the system, absolutely, but you will also be angry because you want you people to stand up. You want you people to not be content with making 50, 60, or 70,000 a year thinking they've made it. No, you haven't made it. You do not have made it because you make even 100,000 or more if your Black community is seen as poor. You haven't made it just because you happen to have a fancy title next to your name if your community can be brutalized by police and that white cop will get away without a doubt. You haven't made it. I mean, if I give a little historical analogy, back in the 1930s, the Jewish community of Germany thought they had made it. I mean, they had a Sigmund Freud, the Einstein, and they were so well placed in the banking and education and many other sectors. And one election put in power a certain man by a man democratically elected, Adolf Hitler, who was made chancellor. And he started to change the laws. And we know what happened during World War II and the 6 million Jews who got killed. So we cannot allow ourselves to be fooled by a sense of integration while saying, Black Lives Matter, raising our fist and, loving Martin Luther King, Brother Malcolm X, and the memories of so many of our heroes. And yet, when it comes to our daily lives, the vast majority of Black people, just like Frantz Fanon said, and I keep saying it, the vast majority of Black people wear a mask. They wear a mask to survive in places of work. They wear a mask out there in society. Our children see this. They see this. They copy what they see. They see the fear. It takes into them. So when we have periods such as this, society shift, an election, we have such mobilization. We have someone like Maxime Bernier and the PPC, all the support that he's gaining from Western Canada that don't like Quebec, Western Canada that's more often anti-Francophone, but Maxime Bernier, the PPC, make Canada great again. They embrace him because he's capping on something. Us Black people, we have to cap on something without needing some Obama figure, without needing some tragedy to happen. We just need to dare to be Black and to show it daily without fear. I do it. I know you all do it. I do it daily.
Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. So taking a look right now, looking at it, I'm seeing Liberals elected and leading 144, Conservatives 118, Bloc Québécois 28, NDP 26, Green 2, PPC 0. So right now, if things stay the way they are,
it's looking like the same.
It's going to be basically the same. The Liberals will have a minority government. They'll need the NDP to side with them in order to form a minority government. I think that, okay, let's take it this way. What are you as Black Canadians? I know some people may not be able to answer this. What are your thoughts of Prime Minister Trudeau tonight? Louis, go ahead.
I think he's a gambler. I'm not sure who he has around him so advising him. But if he thought that this was the opportunity to strike with the expectation of getting a majority, the card didn't play out the way he thought or he was advised would. He's got to be careful moving forward. He might have to bring in some other advisors that will give him a real understanding of the landscape. He's made some commitments to our community, and we're going to hold him accountable because his reign as leader of the Liberal Party, this election shows that a lot more work needs to be done to gain the confidence of the Canadian public and the trust of the Canadian public. So as a leader, when people ask me who they should vote for, I carefully tell them, who would you invite into your house, around your dining table, with your children to have a discussion about your concerns and issues? Which one of them would you? And then vote for that party. Right? Think about it. That cuts through all the BS. We're talking about confidence, somebody that will listen, and somebody that you trust will act on your behalf. Right? And that's how I answered some of the people. So Trudeau himself has to realize that he was not able to gain the majority that he was seeking, and that he might have to work harder to restore the confidence of the Canadian public, and in particular our community, to ensure that he delivers on what he said he would do.
Anyone else want to add? I've got another conversation piece.
Nicole, do you want to go ahead or do you want me to go ahead? Well, I'm going to sound very different than my brother Louis here. So now that there's a projection of what
minority
Liberal win, I'm going to say it straight up. The man is a genius. I like him. Oh, yeah, blackface, he did that, absolutely. And I will, like I said, when I gave the main speech at the whatever Black Lives Matter protest last year in Ottawa, I don't forgive him for blackface, and I definitely am not interested in the putting a knee down and all that stuff. No, we need concrete policies and procedures. But regarding this election, sure, he failed at getting a majority government, but no, he's a genius. That's good. He's going to be well remembered in history books because he has created so much anger from so many people and the growth of a movement like the PPC that they're going to be a thorn on the Conservative Party. Now we have to see how many seats the Conservative could have won if we take all those PPC, all the people who voted for PPC, how it could have changed the map for the Conservatives. So, I mean, for the next, I see it as the next, or even the next 2 or 3 elections, that PPC anger is going to grow and keep being a thorn on the Conservative Party. And I see Sister Sarah Nyengo wrote, Maxime Bernier lost for a second time straight. That's beautiful. That's basically beautiful. This is, in Canada, we succeeded what the Americans failed to do, basically, not giving a chance to when I say white supremacists, openly white supremacists to come in the house of democracy. No, I don't have a problem with Trudeau. I think, he's more likable than many of the others. That's obviously a personal opinion, but I mean, Justin Trudeau in 2010 actually was part of the celebration of my ethnicity, Sawa people. So that's why this is a Sawa identity hat. In 2010 in Montreal, and we adorned him with our traditional clothing and gave him an education on our culture. I don't have a problem with him. He at least recognized systemic racism, pledged funds. I mean, many people will say it. At least he shows, or he seems to show, that he does care. I have a more positive bias towards him than I have towards Erin O'Toole, who doesn't recognize systemic racism. Forget the white supremacist Maxime Bernier. And in terms of Jagmeet Singh, lots of sympathy, but he will not be in power. And regarding Anami Paul, like I asked yesterday, what was the Jewish support for Sister Anami Paul, who basically always puts first and foremost her identity as being Jewish before being black? So no, I don't have a problem. And of course, don't even talk about the Bloc Québécois. We know what they are. As a black person, total dislike. But no, in terms of Justin Trudeau, no, good for him. His gamble paid off. Unfortunately, how much did his election cost? I heard $600 million.
$600 million.
$600 million in the case of a pandemic and an economic recession. That's quite a gamble, and it's sad. It's sad. I mean, I smile and I laugh, but when you think about everything that can be done with $600 million, but this is what politics is. Rule number one, get in power. Rule number two, stay in power.
I got a few questions here. We have discussed over the last little bit about, this is what we need to do, what Black Canadians need to do. But how much can be done without money? Because this is just me. I feel we live more in a capitalistic society than a democracy.
Well, capitalism and democracy go hand in hand.
Yeah,
but you don't need money to educate your family, or to go to the meeting, or to go support Brother Louis for his march. There's a lot of things that people can do without money, because they don't need money to keep watching the entertainment
okay.
shows. It's in that sense that I mean. I'm not talking about money in terms of running for elections. I'm talking in terms of if you want to get involved. Yeah, engagement. If you really want, you don't need money. And yes, black people, we work hard. The stereotype, the prejudices of claiming we're lazy is a complete lie. A lot of black people work 2 or 3 jobs, absolutely. But guess what? You don't need money to go to your parent-teachers meeting. You need an organization, and if you can't make it, ask the uncle or the aunt of the kid so that you are represented, so that this school knows this black child has a father figure, mother figure, and they are involved in the academia. You don't need money to go be present at the march for whatever Black Lives Matter or Black cause, and you definitely don't need it to be 2020 and have thousands of people, including a lot of white people, to be on the street for you to be part of it. That's being part of the show. You just need to dare to stand up and be involved.
Louis, Nicole, have anything you want to add on that?
I think Trudeau is going to have to get to meet Mr. Singh and work out some things, because the NDP party did talk about issues that others were afraid to talk about. So I think it might not be a marriage, but there has to be a relationship now with the NDP to move forward as in the government. And Trudeau's skills will be tested as a leader, seeing as he did not get his majority. So how do we move forward to ensure that the promises are not broken? And how do we incorporate parts of the NDP platform that the Liberals had left behind? So let's see how we respond to that.
Are you hopeful that Black Canadians will respond?
I hope they keep them accountable. I hope they keep all parties accountable. When we look at housing, there's some issues that have to be nonpartisan. Racism is one of them. Housing is one of them. And we're in a mental health crisis like no other. So it's time to stop playing politics after this election, and let's see who really cares about the people. And if people don't start holding all levels, all people in government accountable, we will just be at the same place we've always been. So this is an opportunity right now, regardless of who gets what or whoever is where, to say there are some issues that are really non-negotiables because it affects all of society. And we as our community need to start standing up, speaking out louder, and saying, you know what, we're going to hold your feet to the fire for each party leader, whoever they are. And you need to start engaging. Everyone needs to start engaging with their MP in their riding. And next year, there's a provincial election. So you better start engaging and talking and find out
in Ontario. There's a provincial election in Ontario.
Yeah. Find out what the issues are, where they really stand. And don't wait till they call the election, because otherwise you're just going to be hearing the talk and the rhetoric. So where do people really stand right now? And if they say they're giving the Black community money for this and the Black community money for that, if we get it, when is it coming out by? Don't just sit there and say, oh, well, we're complaining and
stop this. Don't allow symbolism anymore.
And I think you have to even break down that word symbolism for them, Dr. Vi, because symbolism for some is just going to go over their head. Stop just the talk. Come down to, the act. What is the action? And when the action plan isn't working and we're not getting the accountability, we have to hold people accountable for what they say.
We have to be honest. We have to be aggressive, like many of our counterparts south of the border are. We have to stop being we have to stop being on the defensive. We need to be on the offensive.
That's right.
And there's many entry points into this system, into this process. Running for office is just one of them.
Exactly.
Volunteering, as Nicole has spoken about. Get involved with your candidate. Volunteer, right?
Find what you're passionate about. Like Louis, we know what Louis is passionate about. Find what you're passionate about. Even if it's athletics, find what you're passionate about and see where they sit. And is it sitting right with you?
And what we've got to do, and I'm going to sort of go a little bit on Cesar's thing, we've got to make it cool for the young people to be involved. We've got to make it cool because they respond to that type of stuff. We've got to make it cool for the young people because you should have seen the response and the reaction to the protest last summer in the city of Toronto. The landscape started changing. People were in fear, right? Policy, funding, things came out of it. And this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what the community can accomplish in an organized manner. But again, let's go back. We've got to make it cool to be political again with our young people.
Louis, you just said something there. So there was a change, but guess what? Media has made the change very silent. We have to say the change happened because people have forgotten change happened, right? So now everybody, it happened, but now there's no noise. There's no conversation about it.
Look on defunding the police.
Right?
The police were scared. And now they've tried to be more open to community and changing the culture itself. That didn't happen by chance. It happened as a result of the advocacy that took place, right? And we can do this. As I said, we have the power, and we have to understand that we're the ones that bring it to life, or we let it die with us.
So we're gonna have to start wrapping it up. We're looking for some final comments from each one of you. One of the things I will say, we do everything in Celsius now, but there was a time something called Fahrenheit. So water, I'll do the Celsius because people will understand that. Water does not boil at 99 degrees Celsius. It boils at 100 degrees Celsius. So I think right now it's time to take the temperature to 100% on a consistent basis. The activism has the next election starts when this one's done. When this one is declared a winner, that's when it's what happens in between elections at all levels that makes the difference. Don't wait for the election to be called, because by then it's already too late. So I will let closing comments from each one of you. Nicole, love you to go first.
You want me to go first, eh?
And also give your contact information.
You know, I just want to encourage anyone listening to be engaged in whatever it is, whether you do it at the school level, you do it in your community centers, whether you do it at home with your children. Just start getting engaged, and accountability matters. We need to hold people accountable, whether you're into housing, mental health, anti-black racism, homelessness, the prison system, whatever it is. Find the organizations that are doing the work, get involved, ask how you can help. Not everybody has to, come out and be a public speaker. There are different ways that you can help. And when those of us in our community with credibility are running for office, find out how you can help them, because running for elections takes a lot of legwork, it takes a lot of money, and we need to stop expecting just a small group of people to do all the work for everybody. We are a huge community, and we need to start, as we heal while we're leading, we need to now just come out and find ways to support one another. And I thank you, Dr. Vi, for allowing me to be part of this conversation. And in conversations like this, because of what I do in my advocacy work, I'm not just about the party. I'm about all parties, holding all parties accountable. I don't care who you are. You just gotta need to get the work done. I'm Nicole Waldron, Victory Speaks, the Victory Speaks podcast and the Victory Speaks show. I normally do it Mondays and Wednesdays, 8 p.m. and took the last month off and this month off due to family emergency. But we'll be back, God willing, strong in October, and we're going to have some great conversations because October is Mental Health Month. And find the things that you're passionate about. Right now we're dealing with Sickle Cell Awareness Month in September, so please find out how you can help those with sickle cell. And it's also cancer awareness as well, breast cancer and ovarian cancer. So find whatever it is and make a difference. Every voice matters, and everyone has a story that they can share and make a difference.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. And I agree, every voice matters. Let's go to Louis.
Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to thank Dr. Vi for inviting me onto the program to speak about our issues from a Black person's perspective. I'm sick and tired of other people speaking on behalf of the Black community that don't even look like us. So to have this forum gives us an opportunity to bring things back home in terms of the problems and the solutions. So thanks for that. In terms of the election, I'm happy. I am happy because the Liberals and the NDP have to work together moving forward. The Liberals have put some monies on the table. We have to make sure that it's not only allocated, but it's allocated properly to really advantage our community. So it's accountability, but it's also the community has to take responsibility about how we spend that money in terms of community capacity building. We can't be running off with the money. We can't be hiding the money. We have to make sure that every dollar that comes into our community is in the community's best interest. So it's not only the delivering the money, but it's the spending of the money to ensure that we all benefit from it. So the election, the gambler might have paid off to some extent. He did not get the majority, but at the same time forces Justin Trudeau to work with the NDP party to ensure that Canada, the Canadian people, get a fair shake when it comes to governance of this country.
Okay, Louis, where can people get in touch with you?
People can get in touch with me through social media on the Zero Gun Violence movement. And that's the best way to do it. In fact, I have two identities. One is Zero Gun Violence Movement, and the other one is Louis March, LOUISMARCH. So depending if it's gun violence and those issues, that's where you go. And if you want to speak directly because of our community engagement and leadership, then it's strictly Louis March.
Thank you. Final comments before I wrap it up, Cesar.
Well, I mean, as the results have been announced, that it's going to be a minority Liberal government that will be working with the NDP, of course. I'd like to address my thoughts and prayers to all our Black people who voted Conservative and to those who have been tempted by the PPC because of the feelings regarding vaccinal passport and COVID, etc., etc. I'm not trying to be funny or to clown them. I'm just really speaking in terms of what we talk about as Black community, aka what's good for us, how can we improve our faith, how can we basically stop being in the negative statistics. I'm not saying that because it's our fault. Of course, it's systemic racism, a disease of whites, Arabs, etc., all the others. But at the end of the day, we do have a responsibility in changing our faith, and that responsibility can never be to go vote for those who deny systemic racism and those who are anti-immigration, aka anti-Black. So more of the same kind of status quo, but definitely a shifting of society. But also, as Brother Louis was saying, Trudeau and the Liberal Party did recognize systemic racism. They did put money on the table. We can criticize and dislike a lot of the things that they do, notably in the ways that they do it. But in terms of the Black community, it's definitely the party giving the most opportunities in terms of improving the potentials in the Black community. So it's now and definitely up to us to seize these opportunities, to dare being Black, to educate our children, to not just stay in victimization and the past, which is always valid, but to dare stand up in the present and project ourselves in the future, to heal, yes, but also to advance. This is something that we must get from this election, and not wait for the next elections in terms of talking about voting, but go to that parent-teachers meeting for your kid. Turn off the BET and whatever.
Housewives?
I don't know what is Housewives.
Okay.
Turn off those shows, those, I call them BCKs, brain cell killers.
Yes.
That's what they are. So you turn that off and, dare to watch Roots, dare to watch, dare to read a book, let them know who was not just Malcolm X and, Lumumba and Martin Luther King, the usual name. Let them know about, Queen Amani Renas. Let them know about Zumbi dos Palmares. Let them know about people who look like them, who stood up, so that when they're there and facing racism, notably in schools, but also as adults in the workplace, they dare to stand up instead of just going to hide and crying and looking at a Nicole, looking at a Louis, looking at a Dr. L. Jones or Sarah Onyengo or Warren or Dr. Vibe or me to come stand up for them. That's how we will change our fate. That's how the Jewish community, the Chinese community, the Sikh community, that's how they've done. That's how they've done. And then we build strong communities based on socioeconomics, community economics. That's how we eventually stand up politically, even if we're less than 4%. The Jewish community is less than 4%. But are they in this conversation in terms of victimization and being oppressed? Absolutely not. Here in Canada, just as in the United States. So I will leave it at that. Cesar Ndema-Moussa, President of Roots and Culture Canada. You can reach me, rootsandculturecanada.com. Just as you can reach me on Facebook, Cesar Rimy, R-I-M-Y. I'm not blocked, so that's... I'm starting to get nervous if I stay unblocked for too long. Maybe I'm losing a little bit of my edge, But yes.
All right.
Cesar. Can I just throw something in there? Cesar just made reference to, reading. But, just this weekend, if I can do a shameless plug, the 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women had their event on Saturday, right? Recognizing 100 Black Canadian women across Canada. That's a book people need to get. And for 6 years, they have recognized 300 accomplished Black Canadian women in every area of work.
Nicole, allow me to give a shout out as you're saying that to our CEO, the CEO of Roots and Culture Canada, Ketia Peters. She is in the book. Absolutely.
And Ketia, we interviewed Ketia, and Ketia was part of the fireside chat. I know Ketia very well. And this weekend was such a celebration. So go to 100women.ca and get the book and give it to everybody at Christmas and say, here. And we have no excuse to say we no longer have Black women, and I speak for Black women right now, that in any area that you cannot hire. And we now have BIPOC executive search that is finding the Black executives that people cannot say they cannot find a qualified Black person in Canada. No more excuses. Do the homework. Stop being complacent and stop being lazy and stop saying you can't find us to do the work. We are there.
As we're speaking of that, allow me to give a quick shout out. Is that okay?
And we got to go. Okay, make it 30 seconds.
I was just going to say, as we're speaking of that, what's his name? PK Subban. I read this in the newspaper. He wants to put money to the creation of a series of a movie regarding Black Canadian history. Just as I encourage you to find the book Trailblazers, that addresses notably Black history for children and adults.
All right. That is it, folks. We're going to close it down. I want to say thank you to Dr. L. Jones, Nicole Waldron, Louis Mars, Cesar Ndema-Moussa. I'd like to thank everyone who watched live or watched on the replay. Want to say thank you also to Sarah, especially Sarah Yango, who was incredible information, helped make this in real time, made it an epic conversation everyone has. Also to Christopher, Ryan, and everyone else that's going to watch us live or on the replay, The Inspired Thought. Thank you very much. And others, if I forgot your name, Joan Pierre. So if I forgot your name, it's my head, not my heart. Going to end really, really quick on something. My dad, when he graduated from high school, all-boys school in Montego Bay, Jamaica, Cornwall College, he then went to university at Howard University. Yes, young Jamaican man going to Howard University. And we have many conversations, and thank you, he's still alive. And he always asks me, what are Blacks fighting for today? So one of the things I want to leave with is, if you're a Black Canadian, what are you fighting for? And who are you fighting for? You should not be just fighting for yourself. You should be fighting for everyone around you and for the generations to come. And if you don't have something to fight for, contact me, and within 10 minutes, I'll give you something you can fight for. And sometimes you have to go it alone. So what you need to do is, remember, standing alone is a difficult thing. It can be a controversial thing because sometimes we're the only person looking like us in spaces. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's a rare thing. But we need to do more of it than ever before. Because if we don't stand, we're going to get falled and bowled over. So tonight, it looks like it's going to be a minority government. And some people say, well, things didn't really change. Well, we have to change. If you got anything out of this conversation, it's time for us to change. Our lives are depending on it. Our children's lives are depending on it. And Canada's future is depending on it, believe it or not. So with those final words, I close out as always. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. And remember to give yourselves grace. Who knows? We may have another conversation before the end of the week, or we may push it back to Sunday to see the aftermath of everything. But the election ain't done yet. There's still votes being counted out there. If you have anything else, follow the Dr. Vibe Show, Facebook, YouTube. Follow the people that were on this conversation. And also, let's have our own media. Because I don't think any other platform in this country tonight had Black Canadians for an hour and 40 minutes talking about this election. Also, shout out to Sheraton Night. Thank you so much. Big shout out to BIA Media, who helped produce this epic conversation. God bless. Peace to all. Keep the faith. And let's get started. As MC Hammer said, let's get it started. That's another song. Just let's get started. Take care, everybody.